Over the last couple of days, you may have seen interviews with the devs. There was one with myself and there was also one with Crix. Now, fortunately, both these interviews was taking place on different days, so I saw Crix's questions and thought, I'm going to ask some different things rather than just having two interviews with almost exactly the same information. Well, if you're not the sort of person that wants to sit through an hour's worth of two interviews back to back to find out some key information, then hopefully I can round it all off in a few minutes here for you. First of all, we've had clarification on not only the raid system, but also their thoughts behind post-nerf instead of pre-nerf raids. They confusingly just changed the name of the raid system from a flexible raid lockout system to a boss-based raid lockout system. You can only do 10 or 25 heroic in a week. If you kill a heroic boss, you're locked to that ID and that raid size. Whereas if you do normal, you can chop and change between 10 and 25, but you can never join an ID where they're less progressed than you are. So if you were saved at boss number 4, for example, on normal, you would have to find a group that are on boss number 4 or onwards. Now, I know that probably seemed kind of obvious and we was expecting it to be exactly the same as Cataclysm was back in the day, but I thought I'd clarify. In Crix's interview, they was talking about pre-nerf and post-nerf. Now, I've actually been doing a lot of raids on the beta over the last couple of days, and I'm even going back in tonight, and I think for the majority of people in a post-nerf state, the raid difficulty is still not ridiculously easy. Yes, for the most organised raid groups, much like most content up until now, it's going to be easy. But for your average guild, I think there's going to be a decent amount of progress required on most bosses, and there are some bosses that even post-nerf feel really hectic. Omicron would be a good example. There's a lot of things going on and you need to learn what you're doing on each boss and each combination of bosses, and everyone needs to be looking out for theirself. This is the first time since Classic 2019 where the opening tier of raids has actually been difficult, even post-nerf. Now, I know lots of people want pre-nerf, and if I'm completely honest with you, I would have preferred pre-nerf as well, even if it was just for a short while, like 4 to 6 weeks, and then it all went into a post-nerf state to allow a much more wider amount of guilds to be able to clear the content. But still, we're getting post-nerf, and honestly, for the vast majority of players, I think you're still going to have a really good time in BWD and Bastion of Twilight. We won't talk about Throne of the Four Winds. They did, however, say they was going to monitor it, and we could possibly get a more difficult or pre-nerf version of Firelands and Dragon Soul. I would personally take that with a pinch of salt, because I don't think we will. I think we'll still get a post-nerf version of Dragon Soul and Firelands, but you never know. Now, a lot of fixation's been around the cadence and the fact that this time next year we'll be done with Cataclysm because we already know the roadmap of when each patch is going to launch. Well, that's not entirely true. So when I was talking to the devs, they actually said that they're not going to rush it if people are enjoying the content. The cadence, what we've seen, is the fastest it could possibly go, but it's very possible it will go slower. And my gut feeling is it will go slower and it will probably last about the same amount of time as Wrath of the Lich King has. And I think that's because even post-nerf, I do see a lot of guilds struggling with some of the more difficult encounters, which then means obviously Blizzard are going to keep the raids going a little bit longer. So that was quite pleasant to hear. Whilst many of us have been worried that we're just rushing through Cataclysm for no reason whatsoever, the roadmap that's actually been set out for Cataclysm isn't set in stone. So there's a lot of concerns around different things like loot acquisition and making the legendaries faster to get and things like that might not even be relevant depending on how quick we do actually go through the phases. One that everybody was asking for, and even people was commenting on my interview video, was why didn't I ask about bad luck protection from archaeology? And quite honestly, the reason was Crix had already asked, so why would I bother? They'd already said they're not going to do anything certainly before launch, and I've got to be honest with you, going into BWD or BOT or Throne of the Four Winds on normal post-nerf is not going to be difficult. So these archaeology items that you're slaving away at the moment, and I am too, I'm now on 1.4k solves, and I know that might not be a lot compared to some of you, we're really kind of wasting our time because trust me, you're going to be able to replace these or get something equivalent week 1. And while I know you could get unlucky and not have a weapon drop to replace Zimrock, for example, you might get it week 2. So rather than actually driving yourself mental trying to get these for pre-raid bis, when the difference between going in with a 346 weapon or a 359 may look pretty big, in post-nerf, and if you was just doing normal, it's not a big deal. I'd say yes, if your plans are to clear heroic week 1, you're going to want all your raiders having the best possible gear, so then there might be a little bit more emphasis on trying to get it, but don't bore yourself or drive yourself mental trying to get one item. A really good thing was Darkmoon Faire was actually going to launch after the raids, and now this is a big deal because when you are trying to get the best possible gear to maybe start heroic progress instantly, Dark Moon card Volcano, specifically that one really for casters, is absolutely massive and everyone's going to want it. But you would have been starting your progress without it, so the devs have actually confirmed that Dark Moon Fair is being pulled forward, so you're going to get about 4 days before the raid's open to be able to go and hand your decks in, and actually it's going to last a couple of days after the raid as well. We also spoke about things like Conquest Cap and Valor Point Cap, and there is going to be comms going out from the devs in the next couple of days, so I'd expect that before launch. But it sounds like they are going to increase the cap. Now, I actually said that there's no reason for this artificial soft cap anyway, because originally in Tier 11 it had a 1250 cap. Currently it looks like we're going in with a 1k cap until the comms that comes out in the next couple of days changes that. But the problem is when you do all of your heroics, you're already capped just from doing your 7 random heroics in a week. So now any raid bosses you kill, if you don't get lucky and get loot off of them, you're literally getting nothing. You're not getting that small token reward of an emblem or a badge or some justice points or valor points. You're getting literally nothing. So I think they should just remove the cap completely, because actually you're only going to get about 400 more a week with no cap than if they just change it to 1250 cap, or if they put it at 1500 or something like that. If they remove the cap completely with all the bosses, so the 13 bosses and your 7 random heroics, you're going to be able to get just over 1.6k a week, which I don't think that's a big deal when comparing it to 1250 and the fact that there is a chance we're going to have a lot quicker cadence. There's a couple of things that we've had no correspondence about whatsoever that was announced at BlizzCon. One of those is the Streamlined Auction House and the other was Heroic Plus. Now, whilst they haven't got any information on either of those at the moment, the Streamlined Auction House definitely sounds like retail or modern WoW is the route that they're going to be going down. And for the Heroic Plus, it sounds like it's going to be a newer version of Titan Room Dungeons, but they did actually recognise that the gear progression throughout Cataclysm is actually pretty good, especially when you consider the fact that all of the items that you'll be buying for Valor Points in Phase 1 will all become Justice Points in Phase 2, so there's your natural catch-up gear anyway for your ults. But there are some really big items in Tier 11, such as trinkets like Bell. That's absolutely huge for casters. So they may do something where some of these really big ticket items are available for a currency like Sidereal Essence or Scourge Stones. But obviously it's going to be a different system. Titan Room Dungeons doesn't really fit with the Cataclysm theme. They did also confirm that Chaos Orbs are going to be bind on pickup, much like Frozen Orbs was in the first phase of Wrath of the Lich King. Because Chaos Orbs being able to just be bought and sold on the auction house straight away from Phase 1 when every engineer is going to need it for their head, as well as other professions as well for crafted gear, would kind of suck a little bit. But at the same time, while we was in the mindset of a very quick cadence, it also did kind of make sense. But on the basis now, the fact that they've said the cadence is not necessarily set in stone tells me that they probably over-exaggerated the speed at which we would get it, and now they're looking at it and thinking, that's not going to happen. Quite honestly, outside of just some fun little chats around things like why they're choosing to do it fast and many, many hints at the fact that Mr. Pandaria is going to be a thing, such as them outright saying, oh, Mr. Pandaria is a fan favourite, there's lots of things we can do in Pandaria, and all of that. I mean, they mentioned Mop a few times. I think it's kind of almost a guarantee. But outside of that, there weren't really a great deal of information where I could tell you this is going to happen. They did say they're discussing internally about the disenchant option in dungeons. Whilst we don't know whether that's actually going to come to fruition or not, it is something they're looking at. And they also like the idea of being able to speak to an NPC to be able to do the old version of Zolaman and Zul'Gurub still, much like you can do with Onyxia. But again, it's not something they've even thought about working on, but they did say they was going to discuss it internally. I really want to leave you with the one big thing, and that's class balancing. Now, in both interviews, both myself and Crix asked about the fact, would they be a bit hands-on with changing classes that might be struggling a little bit, do a bit of the Wrath of the Lich King style stuff like they did with Feral Druids and Ret Paladins by giving them glyphs, or even nerfing the snapshot for gargoyles. And they seemed all for it, and I think for any of you that have done the beta raids, it's quite clear to see already which kind of classes are going to be stacked for different bosses, and maybe even for the entire raid. So while they might seem pleased with the overall class balance of 4.4 at the moment, I do expect to see some changes and some classes being brought up that are just going to be struggling, and I see that happening actually fairly soon after launch, because I don't think it will take very long before these outliers really start to rear their head. And quite honestly, I would say they were the biggest things that were discussed out of that nearly an hour's worth of interviews, so hopefully that was at least a bit more digestible for you. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. But don't see you again until after launch, then have a great launch, smash it to 85, start getting your gear and all that. If you haven't already got the 80 to 85 guide, well, the 1 to 85 guide from Rested XP, Links in the comment and the description. Obviously, it is an affiliate link, so any guides you buy go towards supporting the channel, which is great. So thank you in advance if you buy a guide. And I'll be streaming pretty much the entire first week of Cataclysm over on kick.com/Scottejaye if you want to come and say hello. There won't be too many videos going out over launch because obviously I'm just going to be enjoying it myself. So I'll see you on the next one, whenever that will be.